All right, what is up, guys? It's Halsey Shutter with the Helicopter Podcast, and myself and my team have been perusing the interwebs of social media, specifically Instagram, and we came across today's guest, Brad Isaacs, on Instagram. Brad, what's up, man? Do you have like 25,000 followers or something?
Yeah. It's actually there was one video, it was actually an MD 500 startup video that went pretty good, and a bunch of people showed up after that one. So,
That's
so
so funny. Before we dive too deep into it, a special thanks to our partners at Vertical Helicasts and, of course, our sponsors at Bell Helicopter and Celicopter. If you haven't checked out Vertical Helicast platform yet, I certainly recommend that you do. It's home to not just the Helicopter podcast, but also the Hangar Z and the Real Rescue, both kind of industry specific podcasts, but different than mine. Very well rounded platform on Vertical Helicasts. Make sure that you check it out. And again, Mr. Brad, welcome to the show. Yeah, that's cool. Like you obviously weren't setting out to become Insta famous, but here we are now. When did you post that video? What were you doing in the video?
I think everybody just likes turbine startup noises. So yeah, it was just a little compilation of just the different switches you push, and yeah, it started growing from there. But yeah,
Tick 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 boom. Yeah,
yep.
no, it's I love that sound. In fact, for the longest time, that was my ringtone.
I
I
think
had
it
like
yeah it made
I
everybody's
think we've all
ringtone.
been there, right? Yeah. So I
Yeah,
like held my phone out when I was starting a Jet Ranger one time, or my
yeah,
buddy was starting and had
yeah.
that noise. And actually, our producer Zach, who's maybe on Zach, yeah, Zach is on. He can't talk, so we can say whatever we want about him. But he actually still has the turbine
Nice.
ringtone. So that is a good sound. There is something pretty magical about that sound. So it's pretty funny. Do people like reach out to you like when you have 25,000 followers? I mean, that's quite a bit. Are you getting hit up all the time, or is it
Yeah,
pretty
quite
tame?
doing the utility stuff, the power line construction stuff is pretty kind of a niche. So I definitely have a lot of people interested in, the pathway to get into doing that. So that's probably where most of the conversations go, and then just how you
Yeah,
got started, which I'm sure is every Instagram, person that's posting a decent amount.
yeah, totally. Well, I'm definitely curious to learn more about what you're doing and what that world's like. That's pretty much an opposite world of flying that I've been in. Uh,
Sure.
I'm really excited to talk about that. But I kind of wanted to start a little bit before that. And reading through your email here, it looks like you started law enforcement. So were you law enforcement on the ground, and then was in the air unit? How did that all work? And kind of what drove you to want to be a helicopter pilot? And was it because of maybe the law enforcement route?
Yeah. So back in 2008, 2009, I was operating heavy equipment for a construction company, and just wanted to do something different. And I don't even know if it was YouTube back then, but just started watching videos of different helicopter stuff. And me and my dad started talking about it, and we ended up going and doing a discovery flight together. And after that, I was hooked. And then
Hook,
trying to,
line,
yeah,
sinker
exactly
every time.
flying,
Yeah, those the
in
flight schools have a they're pretty good at that, right? It's like
yeah,
hey, come let's go. Like for us in Portland, it was like, hey, we're gonna go land on this building downtown Portland.
yep,
You get back and they're like, here's the paperwork that you need to sign for the Sally
yeah,
Mae loan. Super easy, great rates. Just
yeah.
sign right here.
Yeah,
It's like
on that flight, cruising up a low level up the river and stuff, and 20 feet off the water, and yeah, down below the trees, and
yeah,
yeah, it was
they
it was
definitely know
cool.
how to they know how to sell it for sure. So that's is
Yeah.
your dad a pilot now too, or did he not continue?
So he didn't continue with it. He had some medical things, and then just he I think he realized that he'd rather just kind of ride along with me, and, get me
Nothing wrong
help.
with that.
Yeah, they helped me a lot getting me through all that. So, um,
That's cool.
but yeah, after that, then just started looking at the different ways that you could get a job flying, and law enforcement had always been something that I had considered doing prior to thinking about flying. And once I realized there was a way to, potentially get to fly for a police department, I started researching departments in the area that had aviation units, and there was one right across from where I started doing my training at. So applied there with the hopes of getting on full time to fly for them eventually. But there's no guarantee. be like, joining the military was kind of the other option. So it's kind of a life commitment versus a, a financial commitment. I would kind of.
So did you go into the law enforcement with any pilot experience, or were you banking on them maybe providing that experience?
So I got my private rating at the same time that I got hired on there. So I had, that kind of, obviously I couldn't get paid to fly, but I had the aptitude to be able to do it. And so it definitely put me ahead of other people that didn't have that. But it still took me about 4 years of doing regular patrol work to be able to get accepted to the aviation unit full time.
Yeah, that's crazy. I remember I was living in Austin, Texas, um, and I would see their police helicopters fly over. I did a ride along actually with a buddy of mine. It was a hoot, man. We had a good time.
Yeah,
Um, he was like less like a professional cop and more like a cop that you saw in like Super Troopers.
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know if he was just showing off for me, his buddy, but uh, I kind of felt like, oh my god, you can do whatever you want.
oh yeah,
And
yeah.
we uh, we had a good time. You know, he gave me a good experience. Actually, too, kind of sidebar, that same cop, I had him fake arrest my buddy on a bachelor party one time,
Nice.
um, which was awesome. So
Yeah,
that's maybe a story for a different podcast. But um, long story short, I was after doing that ride along, I was like, man, that would be awesome. And so I started looking into it, going through the application process, talking to the people at the air unit. And that was kind of the thing at that point. I mean, I had 1,000+ hours flight experience. And they're like, yeah, you could be a cop, but you're probably going to have to do the ground for, 4 or
yeah,
5, maybe even longer before you get into the air unit. And so for me, I was just like, oh man, that seems counterproductive from to where I'm already at. Like
yeah, for sure.
I could just probably go and get another flying job, build time, and do something else. So I kind of foregoed my path, but it kind of would have been fun. Did you enjoy doing the law enforcement on the ground? I mean, I know it's not the law enforcement podcast, but I'm always kind of curious just to hear what that experience is like.
Yeah, it was good. Definitely a different time than what it is now. I think even after, once I got into the aviation unit, the kind of the political climate and stuff changed. So I don't know if I could go back and do it again. And and it's hard to kind of recommend people to do it now, just because it is an unknown. And yeah, you have to spend quite a bit of time putting up with the, you know, all the politics that kind of come with it. So
Yeah, it's interesting. Policing is certainly way harder now than it was,
yeah,
and I've often thought about that. Like the having to make the decision, like if you're making a decision to pull a weapon on someone, and
yeah,
you don't really have much time to think. I remember when I did the ride along, we would pull over cars that looked pretty suspect. They had like the rims sticking out of the tires, and
hmm
they looked like they were up to no good. And I remember like sitting in the cop car thinking like, oh, like watching my buddy, he's not a very big guy, like walk up to this car like, oh my god, dude, like are you gonna get shot? And so like I definitely I can see that being kind of just intense. Where did you what agency were you with?
So is Gwinnett County Police Department, and that's northeast of Atlanta. So still Metro Atlanta, and then we still had some like countryside. So you had a pretty good
Nice.
combination of both. But yeah, pretty big county, a lot of people. Stayed fairly busy, but yeah, the missions, 90% boredom, flying in circles, looking for stuff that may or may not be there, and then the 10% of excitement. So
Yeah,
sometimes
of
it was
course.
you built time, and if you were proactive, you could get into stuff. But yeah, definitely.
I would I would guess that we have some listeners that are probably law enforcement right now with the goal of wanting to kind of transition into their specific air unit for their agency.
Yep.
You said it took 4 years. What were some? What obviously it's probably heavily weighted on department versus department, things like that, and everything's different. But from your experience, what was the process of? I'm sure it's competitive. Everyone would probably want to go and fly the helicopter, or at least a lot of people. What was the best way that you kind of put yourself ahead of the game to help get yourself into that unit?
Well, I think having my private license in a helicopter was probably the big major first hurdle, and then just making yourself available to those guys. It was a small unit, and they didn't have assigned tactical flight officers, so they were always calling road officers to come in to ride in the helicopter to do that, the police related mission and stuff. And I just anytime there was an opportunity to go up, I'd come in on my off time, or just let them know that I was available to get to know all those guys over there. And I think networking is probably still the best thing. So
Yeah, and anything we do in this business, I mean, any business, it's all about who you know
yeah,
and about, putting yourself in the best position. I mean, we talk about this on the podcast all the time. It's like if you want a job, you gotta do more than just like, submit the resume on the online portal, right? You gotta
yeah,
go out. You gotta, you have to kind of politic yourself, right? You have to go
yeah,
out, shake hands, put your best foot forward, be a team player, have a good attitude. Because
yeah,
my guess is like something in like an air unit in law enforcement. I mean, like those guys are probably more worried about, hey, can we tolerate working with this guy all the
yeah,
time?
yeah.
Other than like, can he fly a helicopter? I'm guessing it's kind of more of a personality. Hey, is he gonna kind of click within our unit? What airframe were you all operating?
So we had 500 E's that they eventually converted to the 530F.
Okay,
So
cool.
yeah, so that helped me tremendously trying to get into utility work, because at least East Coast utility work is all pretty much done with the 500.
And what was that? Once you got selected for the air unit, what did that training consist of, and how long did that take to go from private to then commercial? Did they pay for that training? And kind of to when you're then operating PIC, flying law enforcement missions.
Yeah, so back then, so I was able to they paid for my commercial and my CFI over the course of, a period of years. Um, but I was able to actually go over there in my off time with those guys and build hours towards my commercial ever before I ever got selected to fly full time. Um, so that was really good because they were kind of prepping. They knew that they wanted to select me eventually out of, some of the other candidates. There was other people that got there before I did, but at some point, they knew I was going to make it over there, so they were trying to, build me up beforehand, because the admin wouldn't move me over there full time until a certain time frame. So I got my commercial about the same time I got selected to go over there full time, and then at that time there was really no additional training on top of that. So I was PIC flying law enforcement missions at like
Nice.
200 hours, which
In a 500.
yeah, in hindsight's, totally crazy. It shouldn't have been that way, but it was. I think now they're probably 500 hours before they get cut loose out on their own doing stuff, but it's all
Yeah,
in-house training.
that's
So
wild. I mean, that's it's hard for me to kind of recall where I was at 200 hours. I
yeah,
guess where I was at was finish my CFI, applying to become a CFI, and still like wasn't like, I would still like not shoot a good approach,
yeah,
or like I still felt uneasy about autos or 180 autos or, confined areas, whatever it may be. Like, I feel like I wasn't like and maybe it's just me. Maybe I lacked confidence or I just, but at 200 hours, I mean, you don't have a ton of, experience under the belt. I guess it's nice that at least you were getting a fair amount of experience in your commercial training in the aircraft, because
yeah.
that could be kind of a tall order if you're going to say from like an R-22.
Oh
Now
yeah,
they're thrusting you into an E model,
yeah,
kind of a night and day difference performance wise, and kind of just everything about it is way different. So I guess that probably helped. But you do kind of look back and feel like, oh man, there's was there some learning moments within that early times that you kind of scared yourself?
yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely wouldn't recommend it, and that they've changed their ways since then. We just didn't have the staffing to justify waiting for somebody to get to 500 hours at that time. Um, but yeah, no, definitely, learn from your own mistakes. You don't really have anybody there, to ask if, hey, I should do this or not. So luckily I made pretty good decisions and, came out unscathed. But yeah,
Yeah, you're still here. We're talking
yeah,
today, so you did something right. That's
yeah,
half the battle, right? It's like anytime you start a new job, whether you're a low time pilot or an experienced pilot, there's always a trepidation of this, oh, shit, can I do this?
yeah,
Um, and usually you can, usually your ability kind of at least in my experience, like my abilities always kind of surpass my like expectation of like, oh no, should I be doing this? Can I be doing this? And you kind of just figure it out as you go. The best the best training in regards is on the job.
Yeah.
I've always you go through a training program at a company, learn how they like to do things, kind of get their way down. But most of your actual aha moments during the training process kind of come from just doing it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, utility it's definitely like that. You can only do it so much with somebody there before they got to cut you loose, and you got to,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
obviously they don't
seriously.
want you, major mistakes are, you can't make those, but you got to go make your own little mistakes to figure out how to do it, more proficiently.
And was it kind of always your goal that, hey, I'm going to build my time up in this law enforcement setting, and then transition back over to the civilians, or yeah, I guess civilian side, and fly utility, or how did that all kind of come about?
I mean, the original goal was to stay there, till retirement or whatever, but at that time the police department just had a 401k, so there was no like pension or anything that required you to stay there a certain amount of time. So there's nothing really holding me there. And then as soon as I started, the whole 90% boredom, 10% excitement thing, and then you see utility guys who are, doing, they're actually flying like all day long doing, I would call it cooler things in my mind at that point. What I thought was cooler. It just kind of, drew me to that, and the pay difference was where I was at was substantially, better. So just started kind of networking my way into that and applying places. Once I was probably at like 2,000 hours. Just decided, talked to my wife, decided that we wanted to, try it now, see if I could break into it. But it's a hard industry to get into, so it definitely took some time.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely curious. A lot of our listeners have reached out, kind of wanting to go the utility path, and it's just a path I'm not good about talking about because it's not a path that I went. So I'm really curious to kind of hear that path. But before we get too deep into it, we're going to take a quick break for a quick sponsor call.
Bell is proud to sponsor Vertical Helicasts and their vision to hold meaningful mission, safety, and best practice conversations in the helicopter industry. The lessons learned from these conversations will undoubtedly shape the future of both new and veteran helicopter operators.
All right. So, like I was saying before the break there, that, again, a lot of people actually reach out on social media and like, hey, get more utility guys on. So, look, I've heard what you're saying. I got a boy Brad here, so we're good, right? Brad, you could just inspire us. You could just be our token helicopter podcast utility guy.
All right.
Uh, hopefully, hopefully we can get some more on too. I don't know what people are talking about though. I've had some decent utility guys on, but anyway, I digress. You're looking at options. Pays one of the things. Boredom. I could definitely see law enforcement. Lots of circles. You're probably getting a fair amount of flight time, which is good. But a lot of what you're doing is just spinning circles in the sky. It's probably similar to like one of your other jobs. I think that you had was like the electronic news gathering,
Yeah.
which myself and producer Zach did as well. And that I got like, I think my record was like an hour and 20 minutes orbiting over the same little wreck, in 1604 in San Antonio. I was like, okay, I'm getting
Yeah.
dizzy. Like I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, you kind of mentioned that from your perspective, it's hard to break into the utility world. And again, I can't say that because I don't know that. So what makes the utility world hard to break into?
So everybody wants, previous experience, so it's kind of hard to get that previous experience when nobody's willing to train you. And at that time, there was probably maybe like two companies that would take, lower time guys and get them into the wire environment and, build them up. And yeah, so at that time it was Haverfield was probably the biggest one. They're kind of closing their doors down, changing up. But yeah, so they would start you like on Powerline patrol. So you wouldn't be doing any construction. You'd just be cruising up, taking a look at the lines, inspecting them. And that would get you used to being in a 500, get you used to being down near the wire, and then working with a good lineman to kind of explain the bits and pieces. Because what we do is we're pretty much building or maintaining, repairing the power lines. So if you don't understand what the job is, you can't really you can't put the helicopter in the right spot to help these guys, do their
Yeah.
job.
Yeah, because
So
essentially you're kind of just the taxi driver to get them in a position where they can do whatever they need to do.
yeah, and there's a bunch of small movements you can make that really help them. So once you understand the process of, what, depending on the task, like what they're actually trying to accomplish, you can do little fine movements that'll, save them tremendously, or, to where you can't even do it at all. So it's something you kind of got to build up to. And like I said, most of those companies will start you in patrol, doing like LiDAR scans and stuff like that. And then if they have actual construction and maintenance side, they'll move you in. Long line times, probably the hardest thing for anybody to get external load. So I didn't have any of that. I had plenty of time in the 500. I was super comfortable flying the machine, but zero external load. I had done skid transfers and stuff with our SWAT team and the Swiftwater team, which was one of the reasons I was like, oh, I can do this. I've done
This
it
will be
to
fine.
I've done it to a rock in the river, a rooftop, or whatever. And then, now you're hovering, under power lines and in between power lines, and it's like, okay, yep, no, not the same thing at all.
Yeah, this is different. This
Yeah.
is Yeah, I mean,
So
even the simple, my understanding is even like the quote unquote simple patrol is still very dangerous. I mean, you're very much in the wire environment. Producer Zach and myself actually had a mutual friend at that company many years back. First day on the line flying patrol, had a wire strike,
yep.
and he didn't make it, and the lineman didn't make it either. So I mean, flying in that environment, even if you're doing kind of the easier side of utility, is still very, very dangerous. I did a wire strike class years ago, and it was put on by PG&E up in Portland, and it was pretty cool. I took a lot of things away from it, and it was a combined class of pilots and linemen, and kind of the central message was like, hey, the dude in the back knows more about the wire environment than you up front, most likely.
Yep.
Like utilize them to help kind of make that environment safe. Was that something that you would agree with? Is that something that you experienced as you were getting into it?
Yeah, definitely. And even at the police department, we took some classes like that. Flying in the wire environment. I can't remember who puts it on, but then there's like crew resource management in the wire environment. Yeah, the linemen know that area way better than you. But yeah, the patrol side is actually probably more dangerous because complacency sets in after you've been flying for 8 hours a day, and you're not flying the same spot. So like doing construction, each day I'm probably only working like a 4 mile section of line. I'm just going back and forth all day or sitting in a hover all day. Whereas the patrol side, you're cruising for miles on end. And if you're paying attention to the line that you're following and there's another overhead line that cuts in front of you, then yeah, if you're not, reading the hardware further up, you'll run right into stuff. So yeah,
That's really scary.
I would actually argue that the patrol stuff is, probably as dangerous as the actual construction side.
That's wild. Yeah, wire. It's just flying the wire environment is scary. My experience in the wire environment was flying air medical. For landing off airport for scene call.
Yeah.
Especially at night. We were under NVG, and you can kind of see.
Yeah.
But you really can't see anything. We would, for us, our method of our first method was myself and one of the crew members both had NVGs. So, hopefully you can see something. The next mitigation was literally fly the world's slowest approach. So if you contact a wire, you can hopefully back up from the wire. I mean, that was our instructed mitigation of it, which was like an intense thing to kind of, comprehend. I didn't love doing those nighttime scene calls just for that. You got the volunteer fire department down there, and they're like, "What?
Yeah.
What's a wire?
everything's good.
Everything's clear." And you're like you're on short final. And you're like, "Well, what about this wire that I'm about to run into? Did anyone want to point that out? The one that you're standing right under?" Like,
yeah.
So it's that's definitely intense. I can imagine flying in that that environment kind of consistently. How long were you doing patrol, and did you have times that scared you?
I applied for a lot of those places, but I had networked with the company that I work with now. That I talked to the owner of that company quite extensively, and I got to know him pretty well. And he was moving his operation to Georgia, where I lived at, and so I kind of held out from doing all those other jobs. I interviewed at Haverfield and turned that offer down and stayed where I was at, and in hopes that he would hire me. But they actually didn't do much patrol work. So the idea was they did aerial tree trimming. I don't know if you've seen that with the giant
With the
saw.
saw.
Yeah, so you don't have to have a specific amount of time, external load time, to fly that because there's no other people involved. It's just you and the machine. So
Just you and 9 saw blades.
yeah, no big deal. Don't knock the
What could
power
go
out
wrong?
or yeah.
What could go wrong? It's fine.
But they were going to train me to do that because that's a good way to kind of cut your teeth. No pun intended.
No pun intended. Thank you.
Yeah, cut your teeth actually learning how to fly an external load. However, they were really slow on the tree trimming side, and they were, mainly doing powerline construction. So I went over there with the kind of, taking a step back from flying, and I was actually just a fuel truck driver for the other pilot. And then whenever there was times on jobs that they could fit me in or let me fly the whole job or whatever, I would get experience here and there. So it probably took a year of, mainly driving a truck around, following the other pilot, and him training me as we would go. And in the evenings, if we had extra time, I'd, put the long line on and go fly around and try to put it in a trash can and stuff like that, just to get the experience as much as I could. But yeah, I definitely took kind of a step out of the pilot seat, full time, in hopes that it would, progress me quicker versus having to spend, a couple years doing Powerline patrol stuff. Because that, it's cool, but the construction side is what really interested me.
Yeah, you're
So
kind of more interested in doing that work, and I love that. We've talked about it before with other guests. Kind of more so maybe on actually utility and ag,
yeah,
where it's
ag
like
definitely.
if you're listening, take note to what Brad was just saying, because it's so true that if it's kind of like this. I don't know if a catch-22 is the right phrase, but it's like, okay, you want to do an operation, but in order to do the operation, you typically need experience. But how do you get experience without anyone hiring? It's kind of like this
Yeah,
unsolvable problem, and it happens in the ag world. And I think what you just said is like that's the secret sauce. Start networking, start communicating with the right people, and be willing to do something that's not a quote unquote full-time pilot job. Going
glamorous.
out, yeah,
Yeah,
driving the fuel truck, washing the helicopter, doing whatever other miscellaneous tasks that you can do to
yeah,
learn the operation from that other side is probably not a guaranteed path, but a very solid path of
yeah.
eventually getting to where you want to get. And so I'm glad that you said that, and I'm glad to hear that you did that. And it's cool that you were able to take advantage of certain times to, not just learn the operation from the ground, but also partake in doing some external load and kind of
Yeah.
cutting your teeth and kind of practicing that way. So that was about a year of your experience.
Yeah, so there was jobs. There was a few like patrol and inspection jobs that they were able to put me on by myself, and I went out and did those. But yeah, it took about a year to actually get enough experience to go out and do like a full job on my own without having to have another pilot, wait in the truck for that one thing you're not capable of doing. Um, yeah, and I think I actually listened to one of your last podcasts with is it Lucas from Switzerland?
Lucas Riva. Yeah.
Yeah.
Badass
So
dude.
yeah, so how they do their a couple years of being a load specialist
Yep.
before they fly was kind of the same. It was the same thing, a shorter time. I didn't have to do it for 3 years or 2 years like he kind of had to. But I definitely learned a lot from being on the ground with the linemen, and then I even got to ride like on the long line and go out to the structure and see how they actually did stuff with the helicopter being above me. So it,
Yeah, I don't know.
I kind of
I
know
don't know if
both
I want to
both
be
ends
short
of it.
hauled.
Yeah.
What's that like?
It's cool. It's like a magic carpet ride. The helicopter's it's so high up that the sound's not near as loud, and you're just sitting there
God,
floating in space. But yeah,
how high up are you usually?
I usually don't go above like two or 300 feet. So
Ugh, it still freak me out. Just
yeah,
like, what if the pilot twitches and drops the
yeah,
load or something?
yeah.
Like,
You're along for the ride.
God, that would be terrifying. But yeah, I guess, again, to become a master at any operation, understanding all aspects of it's probably super important.
Yep.
What did you do? I mean, I'm fascinated to hear because I don't think I've ever talked to anyone. Did you end up doing any of the tree trimming ever?
So I've got probably 30 hours of doing that. Yeah. So I went out and we were slow year before last, so they kind of let me go see how good I could do at it. And I can cut a straight line, but it just takes me. I have to go back and do like multiple passes to get all the little branches and stuff. So I'm not proficient enough to make money doing it. So
Yeah,
if yeah
you're not production at
yeah
the saw, the heli saw.
yeah I can pick it up and sling it around and put it in the trees and make sawdust, but yeah, I'm not yet. If the opportunity presents itself, I'll go out and do more of it. But we're
Yeah,
busy
it
enough
just
now.
takes
Yeah.
takes practice. I'm sure that would just be intimidating. That's quite the load to have underneath you, um, and it seems like oftentimes you're cutting it through like a right of way or whatever you would call it. As you're kind of paralleling power lines, like you're one little twitch away from cutting off power to all of Atlanta.
Yeah, they get
You know,
mad. They get mad when you do that, but it happens. I mean, especially distribution lines, like the lines that lead up to people's houses and stuff. There's very small clearances, and a lot of times they wait till the tree is overhanging the power line, and then they want you to cut it. And it's like you have to be skilled enough to cut it a certain way where it doesn't just drop right onto the power line. So
yeah, that
there's
could be definitely
definitely
tricky.
yeah, that's a whole nother skill set in itself from external load because you have to know how to you know, most times when you pick up a load, it's point A to point B. As soon as you pick it up, you put your head inside and you fly there, and then 150 feet out, you put your head out the door. Whereas tree trimming, you're trying to make that straight line all day long, so your head's out the door for 9 hours a day, trying to fly the load, moving in a perfectly straight line. So
Yeah, that would
it's a
be
whole different animal.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. One of our clients in my sales business, um, they do a lot of really cool aerial imaging, for
Yeah,
utility companies. And I got to sit in on a presentation that they gave last year just to kind of see their technology. And the with the lidar and the cameras and everything, essentially they can now do a line inspection like 500 plus feet above,
yeah,
with a camera. And then on top of that, they're using this lidar, and their software that they put the lidar data into is then able to know the species of the tree, and it could be multiple species in one area, and then it can kind of forecast out how long it's going to take for that species of tree to get to a point where it now needs to be trimmed back
yeah,
from the line, which is like incredible. And now they're actually throwing also a methane detection system on that same helicopter. So now they can be 500 to 800 feet, sniffing for methane, lidaring the line, and doing a line inspection with the camera, which is pretty
yeah,
cool.
yeah. It's pretty rad.
Certainly, I think a direction of safety, just being able to fly a little bit higher, not necessarily being immersed in the environment. So I think technology is helping with that. And it's all crazy. It's crazy stuff that, the amount of infrastructure that we have that relies heavily on helicopters to keep things going and keep things going safely.
Yeah,
And I know here on the West Coast a lot, there's been a big push, with the methane detection and with just forest fires starting from like overgrowth onto power lines. It's been a big issue on the West Coast. So, a lot of money is being spent by local governments to kind of mitigate all that. So, helicopters play such a vital role in just keeping our infrastructure going, which is pretty cool. And you're the guy that's doing it, right? You're one of the guys that's in the seat that's actually keeping this machine going, which is pretty fascinating. So, admittedly, when you talk about like, okay, patrol versus construction, I kind of get it. I definitely understand what patrol is, but I don't necessarily understand like what encompasses construction. Like what is there a base definition of like, okay, now what I'm doing is construction? Is it just anything that's setting poles, pulling line, putting linemen on line? What does that actually encompass?
Yeah, so a lot of the new wind farms and stuff, they don't have any lines leading out from them, so you're actually starting from zero. Most of the time, if they can get a bucket truck there or a crane, they'll set the tower, the actual base structure up with a crane. Sometimes in some areas, like a swampy area, they'll use the helicopter to do all that. So like a sky crane will come in and set the actual large section of the tower. Our company, the biggest thing we have is a Huey, so like 3,000 pounds is about the max you would be able to lift with that. So we may set like arms on the side of the tower, and then the 500 primarily is actually moving linemen and material, and we'll pick up to 1,000 pounds would be about the max that we could pick up for the precision that you'd want to do. But yeah, so we'll fly the linemen out either on the long line, two guys on the bottom of a rope. You bring them out, you set them on the tower in the spot that they're going to be working. Then you come back in and you pick up, like, say, a glass insulator that shields the wire from the tower. You fly that out there. They pin that on. You put these big rollers. You fly those out there. They pin those on. And then another thing, like you were talking about, it's a power line. It's you pull rope in first, so that's what the helicopter attaches to a rope on a big drum, and we pull it through and connect it to all the towers, and then they use that rope later on to back pull the power line in. But all of those pieces
Wow.
and linemen all get flown out there with the helicopter. So
So
and
the
then you'll go,
helicopter is like a seriously vital tool to,
yeah.
setting up these lines.
Yeah, so they can do all this stuff depending on the terrain. They can do it traditionally with a truck, a bucket truck, and climbing out on the wire and putting like spacer buggies on the wire to put all these pieces on. But if there's a any sort of terrain that's hard to get to, or manpower wise, they can't afford to bring out 5 extra crews to do it. The helicopter can come in and do it faster and more efficiently. So if there's no time constraint, and they have plenty of people, they'll do it the old school way. But if there's any sort of environmental impact that they need to avoid, or a time constriction, then they'll hire a helicopter to do it.
Man, it's crazy. What is it like that first time that you have people underneath your helicopter on a long line?
You think you know what you're doing, and then you put them on there, and you're like, oh God, I really, I really hope that I can do it the same way I did without having a person on there. But yeah, you got to have the right guys, and I was fortunate enough to have some really cool guys that wanted to see me succeed, and obviously they knew I could do it, to whatever job we were doing at the time. So they were, they're willing to get on there and help you out and teach you how to do it. But yeah, you're trusting them just as much as they're trusting you. But yeah, it's definitely you switch like your mindset from oh, this is fun to okay, now everything's serious. If you screw up, it's not just bouncing an empty weight bag off the tower like you could hurt somebody. So
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
everything kind of
it's a
slows down.
crazy concept to to short haul someone. It's would be a wild experience. And when you're putting someone on a pole, or two guys on a platform, or wherever you place them on, from long lining them in there, you're just looking down, and like, okay, they're good, or do they disconnect themselves and give you a hand signal? Like, how does that all work?
Yeah, so depending on the length of the long line, it's kind of hard to tell your depth perception. So you're relying on the linemen quite a bit to give you head signals. So like if they shake their head no, that means go down. If they shake their head yes, that means go up. If they throw their hand out like pretty much level, that means just hold what you got, like height wise. And then even if they're not doing that, they're typically always looking at the bottom of the long line, or looking, if they're on the line, they're looking where they want to go. So you can see which way their head is pointing. So you know if you're too high or too low. So there's a bunch of little visual cues that you pick up on over time that help you, bring the load to the right spot. And then there's some days it's just, it's luck if you get it to stay in the right spot. If they're not helping you, and there's no, if like the sun's not up and you don't have good shadow references and stuff, it's just you get used to flying the same length rope, and you try to make it look the same every time. But yeah, if they ask you to, hey, throw a 150-foot line on, and you've been flying a 50-foot line, like, okay, well, bear with
Yeah,
me,
now
because yeah.
everything's gonna look a little bit different today.
Yeah, so yeah, you're gonna have to help me out a little bit. But yeah, so it's kind of like flying night vision goggles where you build up all those kind of visual cues to, different sizes of things to know your depth perception. Um, it's kind of the same thing, but it's all now you're just your head's out the door, looking down, trying not to swing the swing the line a place that it shouldn't go. So
Yeah, that's crazy. Hey, we're going to take a quick break for our final sponsor call.
This podcast is brought to you by Celicopter. Tired of listings that go nowhere? Exhausted by tire kickers who waste your time? Don't sell your helicopter alone. Celicopter handles the entire process from start to finish. So, if your helicopter is sat too long waiting for a buyer, contact the team at Celicopter today for your complimentary market valuation. Call 1-855-CELICOPTER, 1-855-735-5226, or email sales@celicopter.com. Celicopter. List it, sell it, done.
So at this point, how long have you been flying kind of more the construction side of the house? Has this been a couple years now? Longer than that?
I've been here 4 years, and I flew for the police department for like 5.5 years. So
Okay. So you're going on almost 10 years called of flight
yeah,
experience.
yeah,
And what, one thing that I always talk about is just like a lifestyle. The utility lifestyle is tough. I heard earlier you mentioned the W word, a wife.
yeah.
I know that utility usually means that you're kind of traveling a lot, you're on the road a lot. I think it's kind of important to talk about, because you can't just work in life. There has to be kind of a balance, and I think
Yeah.
sometimes in aviation, it's hard to find that balance, especially doing utility and things like that. What does that look like for you in your personal life?
Yeah, so if we had young kids, it would be, 10 times harder. But yeah, it's definitely you're gone a lot, and you have to be super flexible with your schedule. Um, because we're a smaller company, so we don't have an abundance of pilots. So if all of our helicopters are flying, that means there's probably only two pilots in reserve to swap with you. So if that job goes, if your rotation is supposed to be 3 weeks, but that job's going to go 5 weeks, you're probably just going to stay out that 5 weeks. You're probably not probably not coming home. Some companies, if they have an equal amount of pilots, to rotate on the same helicopter, then you may actually see a even on off schedule. But yeah,
Sure.
you definitely you have to get used to living in a hotel, keeping your bags packed. As soon as you get home, they may call you to come back out if there's a last minute job or a storm comes in and knocks all the power lines out. You're like, okay, well, leave all your stuff in your bag, and you if you want to keep working there, you're probably going to have to go out and do it. So
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, it looks like I'm talking to you from a hotel room today. So I think
yep,
you're on the
yep,
road.
which is good because the internet's better. So
That's true.
yep,
Yeah, that would be tough. So I mean, for you, like your schedule is kind of, would you call it unknown? Like, you could be gone for 3 weeks and then home for 2 days and then gone for another 3 weeks, or is it, if you have like, let's say you have a 5 week stint, I mean, do you usually have like a decent little break in between?
yeah, they're trying to get you home, and if you're on a long term job, they like say you have a year long project, they can go ahead and budget to have two pilots on that, so you get a pretty good even rotation. So the first half of this year, I worked just as much as I was off, so I'd work 3 weeks and I'd go home 3 weeks, and
That's nice.
yeah, when you're home for 3 weeks and you have you don't have to wait for your Monday to come around. You got 3 Mondays before you ever have to go back to work. It's pretty nice. But yeah, now that like that long-term job's over, there's a bunch of small jobs, and you're at the client's disposal. If they want you there on Tuesday, then you're going to show up on Tuesday, and if the next one wants you there on Friday, and you don't have time to go home, you're just going to go straight to that next job. So you kind of have to be
Yeah.
flexible to bounce around.
And I'm guessing it's probably like a 7 day a week operation for the most part. I mean, you guys are operating, Sunday to Sunday.
So some like the jobs where they're trying to get them done quick, they may work a 7 day work week, but most of the time you're off on Sundays. So and Saturday is usually a half day. So it just depends on the customer. If the linemen have whatever their schedule is what you end up working. So
Yeah. So I think the moral of the story is that you're gone a lot. It's a fun, challenging job. You're going to do a lot of cool things. But you probably have to, you have to have the right partner. You have to have like the right spouse
Yeah.
that's cool with all that. So, it sounds like that's maybe the situation that you're in. We had a guest recently. She had a pretty good thing going on. She flies for Columbia, and so does her husband. They're both
Yeah.
pilots at Columbia Helicopters,
That's
and
cool.
they're on the same rotation. So they work for 28 days, sometimes even together, and
Yeah.
then they're guaranteed to be home, during that
Yeah.
same off time. So like that was like, okay, that's super convenient.
Yeah. So
Um,
my wife was a teacher, and she just left to hopefully next year she's going to start traveling with me and being my fuel truck driver as much as she can.
oh,
So
nice.
we'll have the same schedule and it work at the same place. So
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, you make it work
yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to work with your wife, pal. I work with mine. Let me tell you. I'm kidding. Hillary, if you're listening, I love you and I love working with you. Yeah, I think my wife's been full time now for helicopter going on, I think it's about 3 years now. And we haven't killed each other.
Yeah.
And
That's
she
good.
honestly kind of keeps the machine going. So I'm
Yeah.
very lucky. But we do have kind of our separate spaces, which kind of helps. And
Yeah.
I guess when you're flying, she won't be with you, so that you'll get a little break at least.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and she's got an invested interest in, doing doing her job as the fuel truck, keeping the fuel
Yeah.
sumped and stuff a little bit more
Yeah.
than some people where they kind of slack off and yeah.
Yeah. It's like cold in the morning and you're like, do I really need to sump the truck? I've been doing it every week. It's been fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
She'll sump it every time. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta trust everyone within an operation.
For sure.
Well, that's it's fascinating. It's certainly a different helicopter. I mean, it might as well just be a completely different world from what I'm used to when I was flying full time. Very exciting. I think when people think of helicopters, they think of utility. Yeah, I think a lot of people also I feel like in flight school, if you ask, 10 students, 5 of them will tell you they want to fly aeromedical. 5 of them will tell you that they want to fly, utility. The 5 that end up flying utility have a lot of fun and do a lot of cool stuff. And the 5 that pick aeromedical realize that it's not that fun. After about a year.
Yeah.
But you're home
Yeah.
sometimes, depending.
Yeah.
Here's the magic bullet for aeromedical. If you grew up in some podunk, middle of the nowhere town, then aeromedical is for you, because most likely that town has a helicopter. Nobody else wants to work there, and you just conveniently really want to live and work there. I got a buddy like that, and up in North Dakota, I think it's north or south. I want to say north. And it's like, he's literally just flying in the town that he grew up in. They have a ranch there, and that was always his deals, so aeromedical is super convenient and awesome for him. But I feel like utility, like when I look at utility, I'm like, man, that would be something. Even just flying the 500. I've never even flown a 500. Just flying that thing at altitude would be a blast, let alone short hauling people and equipment and things, saws, all that cool stuff. You ever do any like the torching, the heli torch?
No, haven't done any of that.
You seen that YouTube video before? It's like, I think it was like Brim Aviation, actually up here in Oregon.
Yeah.
And they got like that flamethrower
Yeah.
from the bottom of the helicopter. It's like, yeah, sign me up for that. I want to do that.
That's do that. The part about utility is like at some point it was just a bunch of guys sitting around, guys or girls, and like, hey, I think we can do this with a helicopter, and probably there's beer involved, and they're like, oh, of course. Yeah, let's go out and try it, and sure enough,
let's go see what this is like.
Yeah. Like the first person to go up to an energized Powerline and bond onto it. It's like, I think we can do this. Well, somebody's got to be the first one to go up.
Hold my beer and watch this, right?
Yeah.
So, or like, who's the guy that thought a 9-bladed saw from the bottom of a helicopter was ever a good idea?
Yeah.
That takes some. That's definitely some like drunk ambition right there. Like that was definitely over beers.
Yeah.
And like a joke.
Drawn on like a a napkin,
a bar napkin. You guys look at this. This is a great idea. Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, that's the neat part about helicopters. Again, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier. It's like there's so much there's so much that helicopters do to keep the world ticking, that there's, it's almost endless possibilities that you can do. I mean, that's what I think makes helicopters so special. I think the general public has kind of this fear of helicopters, which I understand. Usually if a helicopter crashes, it's not good. Then you have accidents like with the Kobe accident. That's not great PR for the helicopter industry as a whole. But I don't think what people realize is how much helicopters are involved in just keeping this infrastructure that we have running. Construction side, power side, the utility side, air medical side. It's just like so much of our world is actually wrapped into this industry that we're in. So I think it's pretty cool. And so I always kind of tell people, that are maybe naysayers of helicopters, kind of remind them like, hey man, helicopters do a lot of really good things, and sometimes they crash. So do cars. It's just kind of the way of the world. What for me, flying utility, there has to be a lot of risk mitigation because you're always kind of flying in an area. You're in the height velocity diagram. You're doing a lot of crazy things. You're in the wire environment. What is the way that you approach mitigating and assessing risk?
Well, I think probably the biggest thing for us is the weather. That's going to change whether or not you can or can't do something that day. Because if it's a perfectly calm day, other than the helicopter having some sort of mechanical malfunction, that's going to be your next thing that says you can or can't do it is the winds. But yeah, just if you're approaching something new that you haven't done before, then you got to take baby steps to get there, and don't just jump right into something. Or if you have a question, you have to be able to call somebody and ask how to do something. Having an experienced lineman with you on most of this stuff is kind of a game changer because they've ridden with more pilots than than you have because you're just the one pilot.
You're the one guy.
Yeah, so taking their experience, and they can sometimes coach you through how to do certain things just as well as another pilot could, because they're getting 7 people's inputs versus just that one other person telling you what to do. But yeah, some of the stuff we do, it's just, it's a shit sandwich. no matter
totally.
what. If the helicopter breaks, in that certain area, like there's nothing you can really do.
You're gonna crunch the skids, probably hurt your back, probably walk away. Usually walk away, maybe not. But it's always kind of that risk versus reward. There's just certain times where you have to be within kind of that envelope of higher risk, but then there's reward, or there's kind of a necessity of doing it.
Yeah.
You're not going to just hang out in the HV curve forever if you don't have to, right? Like I'm not going to do it in the missions that I've flown unless I'm, flying air medical and I'm flying, the world's slowest approach at night. So I don't hit a wire, For me, I'm more worried about hitting a wire and, less concerned about the engine, having an engine issue or some other mechanical issue at that point of flight. So it kind of makes sense. Well, this has been fun. I really appreciate it, Brad. What's your Instagram handle again?
It's BJ Isaacs.
Okay, BJ Isaacs. Check him out. He's a pretty big deal. 25,000 followers. Not a big deal, but
half of them are probably bots, so it's all right.
Yeah, they're like in the Middle East bots somewhere. Hey, whatever. It's cool.
Spam. Yeah.
Having followers like that, has that opened up any other opportunities?
Well, actually, getting this job with HLH actually started from an Instagram conversation with the owner. So, just getting here was, the first conversation back and forth started there. And then, I've definitely had some other opportunities to do stuff through social media. So it can be a good thing. And then, if the people that don't understand what we're doing see something, it can also be a negative thing. So,
there's kind of a balance for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty cool. I've talked about this before on previous podcasts. It's like social media is truly allowing people to live vicariously through what other people do. Sure. And I think actually, specifically in helicopter aviation and aviation in total as well, that there's a lack of interest from young people wanting to get into aviation. And I don't know if it's a culprit of they don't think they can do it. It's hey, you have to go to the military or whatever. People just might not know that it's even possible. And now with like Instagram, you could be a 13-year-old kid watching you do super amazing utility stuff and then have access to that person. Send them a message and be like, hey, how did you do this? Like that's so valuable, I think, for hopefully keeping people interested in engaging in aviation on all sides. I mean, there's the girl that does the how-to helicopter. She's like the maintenance side. And she's like, her videos are just doing maintenance on helicopters. She has a crap ton of followers. And I'm sure people are getting involved in the maintenance side of the house just because of her. And so like that's an incredible part of social media and something I'm excited about with social media. And I'm hoping with the podcast as well, I hope that we can help kind of push people along to wanting to get into this industry because it's truly an amazing industry to be in. And when you're doing what you're doing, it's super awesome. So, Brad, thank you so much for coming on the show. An hour just like that, it always goes by fast when you're talking about cool stuff. Again, thanks to our partners at Bell Helicopter and Celicopter. And of course, Vertical Helicasts. They'll say it again. Go check it out. The Hangar Z with John Gray, kind of more law enforcement specific. So kind of what we were talking about earlier in today's podcast. And then the Real Rescue with Jason Quinn. He was a Coast Guard swimmer, and he has people on that, have similar job experiences doing that kind of crazy stuff. So it's a great platform. Consume all your helicopter specific podcast content. Again, Brad, thank you for joining the podcast today.